This is The Gorge. This is a podcast where my friend Sarah and I gorge ourselves on overanalyzing a game or game-related topic. This week we're going back for second helpings to Tales of the Abyss for the PS2 and Nintendo 3DS.
After 2 solid weeks of nothing from you nor I, and a whole lot of health problems in between, we're back, baby! And I don't mean to make you laugh.
No, it's so like I posted on the Twitter. I was down and out for a throat infection, which I thought would last like a few days, and we'd maybe get to record like later in the week, you know, like a few days late, and then we record like a new episode a few days after that. But it straight up kicked my ass until like Saturday.
Yeah, that's just how the old pendulum swings, and then I've had my issues from, you know, all kinds of things, and we didn't record yesterday because I got 3 hours of sleep, but now I'm running on 6, and I'm cool. So I do have a cough still. My voice is a little bit scratchy, but I took some medicine. I got my tea here, so I am good to go. All is well with the world. So we'll get into it because we've been waiting for this one.
Holy shit! I'm so excited for this episode. The first Abyss episode is still one of my favorites we've done.
Oh yeah, of course.
And like we barely scratched the surface of this because we didn't get into the topic that I really want to discuss. This is literally what we're going to talk about here. Like we're going to talk about other things as well, like the villains, of course. But like the core detail of this, which is what the hell is the score, is something that I've literally thought about since the last time I played this game.
This is probably the gorgiest of all gorges. Like if the gorge is about just stupid, self-indulgent, long-winded discussions about video game minutia, then this episode is the purest distillation of the gorge you will get, because we are about to spend an hour talking about a video game world.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is it. This is the one.
This is it. This is the gorge. Welcome to the gorge. This is what we do.
This one we will not do a brief summary of the game because we did that already. This one will go straight into spoiler territory. Right.
And it is spoiler central. And the question is, what the hell is the score?
So this is something that's like, okay, we talked about last time. We talked a great deal about how like Abyss is really good at explaining the details of its lore. Like, you know, it has its own calendar, it has its own like yearly cycle. It explains like how the economy of different countries, and folklore and all that. Like, it really, really goes in depth. What's weirdly absent is like a lot of in-depth like analysis of what pretty much the entire point of the game actually is. Like, characters like talk about it, but because literally everyone, including Luke, knows what it is, there's no like player character to be like, what the hell are you guys talking about?
Right. And honestly, that was actually a really smart writing decision on Namdai's part, if you think about it, because ultimately it means they could kind of leave the score mysterious for the player by having literally everybody on Earth know exactly what or Aldrant, as the world is called, having everybody know what the score is means that for the people outside, aka the player, it could retain kind of a really interesting air of mystery. The problem is that we never really get to pull back the curtain on that air of mystery. We kind of get an idea of what the score is. The score is a series of, and I might be remembering this wrong, but you know I'm probably not. The score is a series of 7 massive stones, literally stones, like giant boulders, rocks. like boulders, giant boulders inscribed with the words of the founder of the Order of Lorelei, aka Yulia Jue. And she was given an oracle from the embodiment of the seventh phonon. Boy, this is a really nerdy conversation. Woohoo! She was given an oracle via the embodiment of the seventh phonon, Lorelei. That's the name of the order. And everything she saw, she wrote down on these giant stones. Don't ask me how she did it. And then an entire religion and basically the world of Aldrent as we know it kind of came to be based around this, around around the immutable fact that we talked about this last time. What does a world look like when the religion based around it is 100% true?
Yeah. And not even a sense of like the religion itself is true, but like it's basically irrefutable.
Yeah.
Like one of the core tenements of the score and why it's such a big hassle is that you can't back down. You can't. There's no way to beat it. What it says will happen. What happens
will happen. And that's a major point of contention about the theme, the ultimate theme of Tales of the Abyss is, can you escape fate? Can you get away from destiny, or is destiny, does it have a stronger hold on you than we realize? Even if you think you've escaped it, maybe it's kind of wrapped itself back around and you find yourself exactly where destiny told you it would be, where you would be.
Yeah. And this is without a doubt the most like overtly oppressive fate I've ever seen in media.
Oh yeah. Oh my god, right?
It's so like powerful that you like I've never seen, like, you always get prophecies, you always get like fate and stuff like that as a theme and a thing. In Abyss, it's so prevalent throughout pretty much everything in the whole game that it basically demands analysis.
And I think what is so interesting, a few things about the score that are really interesting. One is that ultimately only a handful of people in the world know the end of the score. Two, that the score has an end in the first place, which is kind of horrifying in a way. I guess it's, I'm not terribly religious, but it does kind of harken to the whole idea of and there's a lot, I'm gonna kind of touch a toe into this every now and then while we talk about it, because I was thinking about it earlier. It does kind of harken to the biblical idea of Revelations and this idea of there is an end.
Yeah.
It is coming. You can't get away from it. But there's something more inherently sinister about the score's end compared to the biblical end, in that the wildest thing is that ultimately Revelations is the story, of course, about the return of Christ and all of his followers will go to heaven and a happy ending, kind of.
Yeah.
After a bunch of scary shit. But the thing is that the score is just a scary ending.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's like, what really makes it stick out is that Revelations is kind of like the book skips a lot of, like, the Bible skips a lot of years between the end of the previous book and the start of Revelations.
Right.
Like, it's like, there's a big time skip there. With the score, like, the score has a, like, basically, if the score were a book, it has a finite number of pages.
Yeah.
And eventually, you will get to the last page.
And it's kind of, when you take a step back and you really look at it from like you're not, oh, look at this anime game I'm playing. But as a concept, that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To have it end, the idea is that the salvation of Aldrent, like the glory days of Aldrent, of course, because the score does predict that if everything in the score happens the way Yulia Jue says it happens, Aldrent enters an incredible period of prosperity, followed by plague and death and the literal destruction of all mankind and life as we know it on Aldrent. The end.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
It's terrifying, and it sorry.
It's okay. Get it out.
I'm good.
You gotta get that evil out, man.
what makes it so weird is again, it ties back to the idea of like it has to happen. And one of the big sticking points about this is that we know what the score is. We know it's a prediction, like an irrefutable prediction of what's going to happen, like the events that are going to happen. What we never get a feel of, and what's the thing that I keep racking my brain over and trying to figure it out, is the mechanics of the score and how it works. Because what makes the score really weird is that we don't quite get a grasp of A, the scope of it, B, exactly how it holds everyone, and C, like how characters are able to defy it. There's a lot of questions that there's no real way for the game to give us those answers, and I don't think it's covered at all in any of the supplementary material, like the manga or the anime or the, audio CDs or anything like that, because those are usually more focused on like character development than
for sure,
world building, and there's no Hyrule Historia for Abyss.
God,
as much as I would love that, that would be radical.
I would pay so much money for the Encyclopedia of Aldrich. Are you kidding me?
Every big game series should get a Hyrule Historia.
Oh my god, right? And especially games like Tales. Oh god, but there are so many, because it's interesting too, because if the score was just the how to put this, kind of the nebulous score, if it was just the score, we obey it, certain people can relay it to us, then the fact that everybody's lives and everybody's fates are recorded in the score would make sense, because it's more of a
vague,
like a power that certain people can tap into.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that that you wouldn't require like the in-depth procedure that goes about it, and it would be a bit easier to digest as a concept, and you also kind of make Van in the God Generals seem a bit more like overzealous about defying it.
But here's the thing. It's not. The score is not a nebulous... It's not some kind of crazy collective unconscious superpower that certain people who can wield the seventh phonon can kind of dive into and see the fates. It is literal books on giant rocks.
You know what it is? It's not the system of Chosen from Symphonia.
No,
which
it's
is,
not.
one of those things where, like we talked about for a lot of other Tales games, one of the big things of Tales games is this is the way it's always been. Mm-hmm. And you defy that because really there's a secret, hidden agenda behind it.
Right.
The score is cut and dry. It is what it is. There's no secret behind it. Here it is. Black and white, clear as crystal.
The score is in the Tales series, it is strangely, completely unmalicious. It has absolutely no malice behind its existence whatsoever. For all intents and purposes, everything we know from the game itself, from what the game told us, is that Yulia Jue actually was a good person. And she was a Christ figure in a very weird way. We'll get into that later. She was a good person, so there is no darker purpose for the score's existence. Now, the Order of Lorelei spawned a bunch of horrible, heinous shit in its wake after her death, of course, but ultimately the score itself is completely benign.
Yeah.
Which is so irregular for a Tales game, because the Chosen system, Rhizamaxia in Exilia, the Arafagos and Vesperia, these are hidden things, hidden natures of the world, that are ultimately born out of malice.
Right.
But that's not the case in Abyss, and it's weird.
And so here's the overall, the big sticking point, and why I have such a hard time, and why I spend nights just how the fuck does this work?
Right?
It all wraps down to one singular line.
Oh boy.
And that's the hardest part, and I'm pretty sure it comes from oh crap, what's her name? Shit, Tier's teacher.
Legretta.
Legretta. It comes from Legretta. Or maybe it's from Guy. She's having a conversation about the score with the party.
Right.
And either her or Guy says the line...
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
People use the score to decide what they have for breakfast.
Yeah, that's Legretta. Oh, man.
And
oh, man.
What makes that so weird is that Legretta's not a character to exaggerate. So you can't take that as like, as an exaggeration or hyperbole or anything like that. When she says that, she means that people use the score to decide what they have for breakfast. Which means the score goes that in depth for every single individual person.
Who's ever, and not just who is currently living,
yeah.
but who has ever lived
and ever will live.
And since the score was written 3,000 years ago? What?
And so here's the biggest problem I have.
Okay.
If we can accept that as fact, and if people have so little free will they can't even decide what they eat, there's also another line where someone talks about they can't marry someone they want to marry because the score doesn't say they will.
Right.
It's like an NPC or like a side quest talks about that or something like that.
It's actually the entire linchpin of why Nefri and Peony aren't together.
Oh yeah, because the score said they weren't meant to be together.
Yeah, it said that Nefri, which is Jade's sister, she didn't come up in the last podcast. Nefri was supposed to marry someone else, and she decided to follow her score, and so she got with him instead of Peony.
But here's the problem with that. Here's why it bothers me so much. If that's true, if the score goes that in depth that like you literally can't even fight it for that small bit, how did Van do anything?
That is a good question.
Right?
I think
like Van's whole thing is he wants to rebel against the score.
Right.
So there's two options. One, he broke the score.
Right.
Which that means he did it. His mission is accomplished. His part is over.
Good job.
Two, the score says he was supposed to rebel against the score.
Right. It's the same. It's kind of a question of if God is omnipotent, can God make a stone even he can't lift?
Yeah. Can God microwave a burrito so hot even he can't eat it? Which is the one I always prefer because I like burritos more than rocks.
It's true. It's a lot tastier.
But so that's the part that I have such a hard time wrapping my brain around because here's the thing: if the score is one of the linchpins of the game is that replicas are not bound by the score,
right? And
they are free to act.
Exactly.
Okay, if that's true, and if the score is so minute you can't even decide what you eat or who you marry. The score should have been completely thrown off the rails the minute the first Ion replica was created.
Right, because
Van should have won at that moment.
Yeah, actually, technically, Van wasn't even born when the first replica was made, because the first replica, well, I don't know, maybe he was made. Van's 28. Anyways, the point is, the first replica was the Nebulum replica that Jade and Dist made after the original Nebulum died, and even if Van is alive, he would just be a baby.
He'd be a baby, yeah. He'd be a kid.
He would, so really, at that moment, the score should have been thrown off kilter.
Yeah.
And yet, here we are.
So, it's because, and here's the thing. The reason why this is that, okay, so we can assume up to the point, we have to, if that's true, we have to assume that up to that point, the score said Jade would create a replica.
Right.
Right? Because up until that point, nothing else has deviated from it.
Right.
So, at that point, the score becomes null and void.
Yeah.
Officially.
But
it clearly doesn't.
Because if replicas are immune from the score, then the score shouldn't have even be able to predict that Jade would create a replica.
Yeah, the score should have completely stopped at that point.
Right. But it didn't.
It doesn't. It keeps going. And that's the hardest part for me to swallow, is because the God Generals are so adamant about the fact that you can't fight the score. And the score, it controls everything. Right. But it doesn't. It doesn't. It's fallible. We've seen that it's fallible. Right then and there.
I'm wondering, hold on, while we talk, I'm actually going to pull up, hopefully this doesn't stop the recording, does it not? It doesn't! Okay, I'm going to pull up the Asalia entry on the score real fast.
Okay, yeah.
Because, and I should have done this research, this is why you
I try to do research on this, but, like, in all honesty, it's so vague, and it's so hard to wrap your head around that, like, I tried to take, like, extensive notes, and they basically just melded into gibberish, because I'm like, where do I even begin with this?
Right. The, where's the Asalia? The score of Yulia Jue? That's not the Asalia page, but I wonder what it'll give us. Because there's a few, the deal is that, for some reason, the score is, but my personal interpretation, and we can kind of battle this out, is that the score is both incredibly specific and wildly vague, almost at the same time, because the score has a lot of very, very specific things. Okay, here we go. Like, and this is just a good example. It's that, so the main reading of the score that kind of triggers the destruction of Exariuth at the end of Act 1 is that it says, in Kimlaska one shall be born who inherits the power of Lorelei. He will be a boy of royal blood with hair of red. He will be called Light of the Sacred Flame and shall lead Kinlaska Landvaldir to new prosperity. ND 2002. The one who sees his glory will destroy his island of birth. Okay, so that's not the... Damn. Okay, but there's another one where it says basically the Light of the Sacred Flame will go to the Miner's City, will lead his people to the Miner's City, and turn power into calamity, which I think is almost the exact line because I've played this game a lot. Yeah,
that's more or less it. I can kind of hear it in my head.
Yeah, and so that's the thing though, because they oh god, here we are. We're going down the rabbit hole now.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of going in a lot of circles
because the Light of the Sacred Flame will lead his people to the Minor City. There he shall turn power into calamity, and ignite a war between Malkuth and Kimlaska Landvaldir, right?
Which happens.
But the deal is that it happens again. Because the Tower of Rem used to be a mining city.
Oh, fuck me.
And what happens at the Tower of Rem? It
turns power into calamity and he starts a war.
Yeah.
Motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, alright, so here's here's the weirdest part about all of this, okay? Like, Van can peek behind the veil. Like, he's backstage. He's behind the curtain, behind everything, you know? Mm-hmm. He can see the strings and the stagehands, right? Like, that's one of his whole things, is like, he's like, I'm in on everything. I got my hands in all these pies.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Basically, his whole thing is like, I hate the score because it controls people. Mm-hmm. But we talked about this when we played the game, you and I. The fact that the reason he leaves Luke, like replica Luke, mm-hmm. at the Fonfabra Manor, and he takes Ash, we figured out that it's so that he can train Ash to do everything that Luke does.
Right.
So that no one sees that Luke's score isn't accurate.
Right.
Right? Like, we figured that out. Like, the reason Van is Luke's trainer, and the reason that Luke and Ash have the exact same fighting style, is because Van had to ensure that both Ash, who is the real Light of the Sacred Flame,
right,
had to make sure that his score matched up with the score they read for Luke.
Right.
So, his whole thing of, like, I hate the score because it controls people goes right out the window because he spent, like, 10 years doing the exact thing that he spent 10 years defying the thing he hates. He won!
I know! I'm thinking... Oh god. Okay. The way I'm thinking it works is that... Well, I don't know. Shit. I'm thinking about what I'm about to say in my head before I say it. I'm going, no, that doesn't make sense, but I'm just gonna say it. Is that...
Welcome to my night like every other day for the past 2 weeks.
I know! Oh my god! Because the thing is that, okay, this all works. All of this, the whole game works perfectly if you assume that the score is the script. The score is the script of Aldrent itself. It is what everybody follows.
Right.
Because to not follow it, they bring this up a few times in the game, to actively go against your score is to invite destruction.
Right.
And misfortune. So that's the script. That's what happens. You go off script in a play, and suddenly everything's fucked up until something rights itself, or you are removed from the show, as it were. So the question then is, if that's the case, if the score is the script, and only a handful of people actually have read the script in advance, as in people who know about the closed score, because there are 2 types of scores, if Van has knowledge of the closed score, and that is why he can do all of this, then it makes sense, because he knows what's going to happen, and he is planning around that stuff. Right?
Right.
So that's how it makes sense. The replacement of Luke, the creation of the Luke we know, and taking the original Luke and making him into Ash, essentially, all of that makes sense if you assume the score is a script, and that that is the way things are supposed to go, and Van is working behind the scenes, like you said. He's the one backstage, kind of steering things in a direction he wants to go to eventually kind of fuck the show up. But then things get kind of weird when you think about it that way, because it kind of almost makes it sound like the score did know about Luke because of the whole Tower of Rem thing.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, that one can be justified because Ash was there too.
Oh, you're right.
Ash
God
went to the
damn
Tower
it.
of Rem too.
You're right. Shit. Fuck. Shit.
But here's the weird problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that we also we're basing everything we've said so far on the idea that the score is completely infallible, except unless you're a replica.
Right.
Then you can go off script.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's true, and if it's that precise and it's that focused, then this game should have been a crazy Silent Hill nightmare the minute you get to the first town in the game. Because here's why. When Luke gets to what is the first town in the game?
Engave.
Engave. When you first get to Engave, there's a scene where Luke steals and intentionally steals an apple from a market stand, right?
Right.
If the score was like completely infallible, except for Luke, at that point in the game, the shopkeeper should not have said anything about it. He should have completely ignored Luke. Because that wasn't in his score. As far as that guy is concerned, Luke doesn't exist. He should not have acknowledged Luke at all or talked to him in any way. He should have gone about his business like Luke didn't exist. No one should acknowledge that Luke exists. Because he's not in the score.
No! Okay! But, sure. But, that's creepy to think about.
Right? Like,
yeah.
The whole thing is when Luke first gets to the manor after being like, when our Luke arrives, no one should have acknowledged him, because he shouldn't exist, which means that their super ultra precise score that dictates everything they do should not have had room for them to acknowledge him.
Right.
Like, they...
you're right. Okay, but the deal is also that not everybody is that... Now we're getting into that weird nebulous territory of like, does knowing your fate change your fate? Or does knowing your fate change your actions? Because the deal is that Legretta says, well, there are some people who can't even, they consult even what they're going to have for breakfast, But then there are also people who just kind of never do any of that.
They get their score read on their birthday, and then that's about it.
And that's about it. And otherwise they go about their lives. And still, just by going about their lives, the people in Engave who are they're just farmers. They're just normal people. Those people, they just do their thing every single day. Nothing ever changes. And by just doing that, they, I assume, are following their score.
Yeah, because it's kind of like the Monty Hall problem. Where it's like, whatever you decide or not, there is a correct answer, and the correct answer doesn't change based on whether or not you change your mind. Like, even if you don't read your score still exists.
Right.
And so maybe you're just unintentionally following it. This is what would have fixed a lot of this, is if we had seen what happens when someone deliberately goes against their score on purpose,
I would love to have seen what someone's birthday score reading looks like. We should have gotten a birthday score reading so we can know exactly how in depth that goes. Right.
And we also should have seen, we should have heard rumblings about what exactly happens to someone who blatantly defies their score and isn't a replica or associated with replica.
Right, who is just a normal person.
Yeah.
Like a side quest about a guy who actively defied their score and what became of him.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Because that would have helped clear up some of the weirdness. But I guess it worked in Namdai's favor, because it's 10 years later and we're still talking about the score in depth, because it's such a strange... this is what happens when you make a video game about the weird nature of fate. And if they had made it more blatant, if they had made it more like if they had made it like, yes, you can defy your fate at the end of the day, then it would be a little bit more digestible, because then the score becomes fallible, right?
But then also that means that Van's threat as a villain completely falls apart, and he loses his bite as a result, and he just looks like a crazy person.
But he is kind of, but then you
can
accept that he is a crazy person. But you could accept that almost. I mean, it kind of makes him lose his punchiness, absolutely. But we're talking about a less interesting version of Tales of the Abyss, ultimately, where, ultimately Tales of the Abyss becomes less interesting if you say, well, the score was just wrong.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool, the score was just wrong. Van is a crazy person who wants to destroy the world for no reason. I mean, that all makes sense, but it kind of isn't nearly as, psychologically satisfying as the story we got.
Yeah.
But, if all of that had been... If that had been the case, if the score had been wrong and Van was just a crazy person, then it would all be a little bit more digestible. Because then you could just be like, oh, well, the score was wrong. Let's move on with our lives.
Yeah.
But then the game keeps pulling this weirdness where it's not wrong. Where
events still keep happening. It's almost like the score is trying to re-rail itself.
Yeah. Isn't that weird too?
Yeah, there's a thing, and as someone who adores time travel and has, this is kind of a weird tangent, but as someone who adores time travel and has played Chrono Trigger a great deal, I've always had a fan theory about the mechanics of time travel in that game, and it kind of applies to this too, and it kind of applies to time travel in general, the way I prefer it, is that it's a combination of fate and free will, in that you can technically rebel against it, but minor actions, relatively minor actions. For instance, Nebulum was created and she did slaughter a village, but in the grand scope of things, that's not a super major diversion.
Right.
Minor hiccups like that will be forced and re-railed.
Right, it'll correct itself.
For instance, for Nebulum, Nebulum slaughtered a village, and then what did she do? She hid in a cave for decades.
Well, she was sealed in a cave,
But then she's gone. She doesn't matter anymore. She's put away so the score can rewrite itself. Luke and Ash keep getting forced together.
Right.
Because the score is trying to write itself, and by forcing Ash and Luke together so that Ash's score can come true, and Luke can also interfere with it.
Oh, and that's... Oh, man, you're blowing my mind right now. Because that's... depending on your interpretation of Mr. Ending, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Ah!
Doesn't it hurt? Doesn't it hurt?
No! Oh, man. Oh, I never thought about it though. Oh,
yeah.
fuck.
So the idea is that the score is technically fallible and you can technically defy it. But what Van wants is not minor hiccups. For instance, or the example of Luke stealing an apple doesn't fucking matter.
Right.
Whatever, or even the simple fact of the gang buying gear from a shop. If you think about it, defies that shopkeeper's score because he's selling product he wouldn't have sold before without Luke walking into the door. But, so minor hiccups like that don't matter, and they get quietly shoved away or whatever. But, so what Van wants is a one big grand derailment.
Right. One huge event that completely and totally would irrevocably throw the score off track because the replicas represent kind of the ultimate, not just the fact that the reason they're immune from the score, or in part the reason they're immune from the score, is because a large portion of replicas are dead people.
Yeah, exactly.
We see that in the fact that Guy's dead sister is one of the prominent replicas other than Luke, who is actually in the game.
Yeah.
Mary she's there and she is dead.
And we get a lot of like idle dialogue between NPCs of like, oh my god, my grandpa is walking around in a weird onesie.
Yeah, weird costume choice there.
As a side note, like the replica footy pajamas,
it's weird.
We're not a flattering design choice.
It was not in a game with really, really good design. The replica's weird footy pajamas.
You could have
was a strange stumbling block.
You could have given them better than hillbilly long johns.
Yeah, it wasn't great. Like on Mary, it didn't look awful, but then there's the fact that there's like a bunch of old guys standing behind her in that same outfit, and it's really awkward.
You're just that's not flattering.
But the point is that Van's plan is the ultimate derailment, not just because he's literally destroying Aldrant with Eldrant.
Yeah.
Eldrant. Excuse me. Eldrant and Aldrant, whatever. He's not literally destroying the land that Aldrant is made out of to create his new world. He's literally resurrecting the dead.
Yeah.
Which shouldn't be possible. Which according to the score is not possible. Clearly, because the score has obviously dictated that Jade will fail no matter what.
Yeah.
So clearly you can't bring back the dead. And yet that's pretty much exactly what Van is doing. And so to have the population of the new Aldrant be entirely replica is brilliant in a way.
Yeah.
Because it entirely replica of the dead, because a lot of the replicas that are being brought back are made from the replica data of the inhabitants of Hod from the Hod War. And because of that
here's the other weird part now that I think about it.
There's so many weird parts.
If this is true, and you can have minor deviations from the score, Van's been planning this for a long time. You think someone would have read his score and been like, ooh, boy.
Well, no. That's the thing, though, because Van does have all of his fingers in all of these pies. Remember, Van's two biggest conspirators are the two highest members of the Order of Lorelei.
That is true, yeah.
There's some of the only people who have access to the closed score, which is the score that is not that minor members of the order and normal people can never know. The closed score is the secrets. It's when people die. It's major world events because they can't let people know about that stuff, because if they do know about it, they'll try to avoid it, and then everything's gone to shit.
Okay, you can't see me cringing right now because I just had a thought that's fucking me over.
Okay, give me. Hold on to it for just a second.
Finish your thought, yeah.
Because Van's two highest conspirators are the original Ion and Grand Maestro Mose. Those are the two highest ranking members of the Order of Lorelei, and because of that, nobody is gonna know. I mean, because the new Ion is completely under Van's control, which is what the original Ion wanted. And then Mose is obviously in it for glory. He thinks he's fulfilling the score by going along with what Van wants. So he thinks he's doing the right thing, kind of. And so because of it, nobody could ever look at Van's score and be like, hey, that guy's up to some shit. Because the two people who would are on his side.
Okay, so and this isn't like a what if or like a question. This is just a weird thought I had.
Oh god.
If that's true, that means that it was probably Ion and Mose who suggested all of this to Van in the first place. Like, younger Van, because they would have seen that Van is up to some shit, so they would have gone to younger Van and been like, hey buddy, do you want to help us with some stuff?
So do you think, honestly though, because Mose was really more of a pawn in all of this, right? Like, Mose is ultimately, he's not there to derail the score. He's there to fulfill the score. He wants glory, and he wants prosperity for all of Aldrich and all that stuff, and he wants to be the man in the center of all of it so that he'll be praised and da-da-da-da. So then, does this mean that the original Ion is the mastermind of Tales of the Abyss?
Ion is Genova.
Oh my god! The original Ion is Genova.
Right? Like, it's his fault. It's all his fault.
But that makes sense.
He would have kept Mose in the dark about the truth, and he would have brought Van in and been like, hey, kid Van. You know, hey, little 12-year-old Van.
Well, no, because Ion, when he was still young... Oh, shit, though, because
here's the thing. Okay, so the Ion that is in the game that we talk to, that we hate...
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is what, the 7th Ion?
But they're the same age. Like, he can't...
Yeah.
Like, there's 7 Ions, and only 3 of them still exist. Florian, Sync, and the Ion we hate.
Yeah. But here's the weird thing. Mm-hmm. Fucking... they would have had to go through Ions like fucking crazy.
I think they were all made at the same time.
Were they?
Yeah, because Sync mentions that him and all of the other Ions were thrown into the volcano that Doth is built at the base of, because none of them had the capacity for the 7th phonon that the Ion that we hate.
Okay.
So they made all of these Ions at the same time.
So that... Fuck. Okay, so there goes my theory then. Like, no,
yeah.
Ion wouldn't have brought this... Ion would have known about it, but then he would have waited for Van to bring it to him.
But, I mean, that does make sense, though. I mean,
yeah.
Van had the idea, but Ion is the one who gave him the power to do it, because Ion, the original Ion, would have known about all of this. He would have had... From the minute he was made Phone Master, he would have known a lot of things. He would have known, one, that he was going to die, and that's actually the whole reason the Ion we know exists, the Ion we hate exists.
Yeah.
Is because the original Ion knew he was going to die, and he got super bitter about the fact that nobody told him.
So I'm gonna, he's like, I'm gonna M. Bison myself, make me a bunch of clones, right now.
He decided he wanted to fuck up the world as revenge upon the world for his existence, basically. Which is fucked up in and of itself, but that's another story. So then... he would have known about all of this, and eventually Van would have come to him and be like, hey, I have a plan, and basically what Ion probably said was, yeah, I know.
Yeah, or you would have like, oh, really, you have a plan, tell me more.
Yeah. and so then they made, because Van, because Van recruited Dist. What's up?
Okay, so if Ion's like, who was Van working with when he made Luke? Did he make Luke on his own?
Yes.
He would have had to, because there's no way Ion would have been old enough to help him when Luke was created.
Right, because Ion is 16, 14. He's... Ion, physically, I mean, like the Ion we know, he's 2. But physically, he's like between 14 and 16. I can't remember which.
He's younger than Luke.
but older than Annis.
Yeah.
So he's like 14 or 15, something like that.
Which means that he couldn't have been in on Van's plan, which means, okay, well, that does make sense, though, because Van would have had to be like, hey, Ion, look at these results. Right.
And that makes sense because I think he had Dist. By then, he had already recruited Dist, and Dist is his replica technician, to put it simply. So he had Dist, and Dist, and Van knew about Coral Castle, so that was the perfect place for them to put the replication facility that created Luke, the Luke we know. But I guess that means at some point, then the previous phone... What about the previous phone master, then?
They would have also had to have known this would have happened, but maybe they were like, fuck it, not happening to me.
Or maybe the fact that Van is scheming something is written in the score, and, I mean, the score says Van's doing something.
Yeah, maybe this...
So you can't stop him.
The previous phone master probably never even had the idea of, like, well, fuck it. I mean, I can't do anything about it.
It's a really weird...
This is such a crazy fucking game.
It's a weird... And the thing is, I don't... sometimes logical inconsistencies in video games can be... It's a symptom of bad writing.
Yeah, you can hand wave it away or something. You can be like, well, whatever, they didn't think about it. I'm not going to think about it.
But I don't think that's what's happening in Tales of the Abyss.
No, because the game is so wrapped around it that the writers had to have considered something like this.
For sure, and I think that is, we get back to where we started at the beginning of this conversation, which is, I think Namdai intentionally made the score a little nebulous so that it kind of retained an air of mystery about it so that you couldn't have all the answers.
Yeah, totally.
I think that was intentional. Now, do I think it was the right decision? I don't know.
The thing is, like, was it the right decision? No, because we have tons of questions that will literally never be answered. I have so many questions.
I know.
But yes, because it made the story super compelling and interesting.
It's so good. And ultimately the problem is that unlike every other Tales game in existence, you could conceivably make a sequel for every other Tales game. Even Exilia 2, fucking kill me. You could make a sequel to Exilia 2, right?
Yeah, you could make a sequel to Vesperia. You could make, the idea behind most Tales games, at least the ones that we've played, is that you end the current, this is how it happens. You end the current problem, and you're like, well, we've got this whole new world that will be like, well, fuck, what's gonna happen now? You could make another monster to fight.
Yeah, and they did that with Symphonia. They regrettably did it with Exilia.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with Abyss and why Abyss can never, ever, 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 ever have a sequel. Because the writer for Tales of the Abyss has come on record and said that Mr. Ending is whoever you think it is.
Yep. They would have to backtrack and they'd have to pick one or the other. And it would
or they'd have to come up with an answer, and it would throw everything into disarray.
Yep, it would all get fucked.
Everything would go to shit instantly, and so we can never get a sequel to Abyss to explain more of Abyss, which I would really love to have for sure, because of the nature of Abyss's ending. And by the way, I don't think it's Luke or Ash. I think it's
a combination of both of them.
I think it's kind of both, but because I like Luke and I hate Ash, I think it's more Luke than Ash.
It's like an 80-20 split between Luke and Ash.
But it's also kind of like a fusion in Steven Universe, where
a little bit.
It's a whole different person.
Well,
but it's also
when two
not.
rubies fuse, they form a bigger ruby. So this is just a bigger Luke. He's like a foot taller. You can't quite see it. Yeah, he's like a foot taller.
Two redheads standing on each other's shoulders to go see an R-rated movie. Oh man. And so many. I feel like we didn't even get into them. You had notes. I feel like we're missing the meat. I feel like I could talk about this all night.
Well,
honest to God.
The problem is that, like, again, we'll never quite get an answer of what the nature of the score is, or like how it affects people, or what. Like, ultimately, we don't even get a single straight answer of whether or not you can voluntarily defy the score.
Right.
Can no one does it. Like, can someone be like, nah, fuck that, I'm having oatmeal for breakfast?
But like you said, the score is self-correcting, so it could just ignore something like that.
Yeah, but I mean like, but like, in essence of like the simple idea of like self-correcting because of replicas.
Right.
Like, is it only self-correcting in the idea of like if a replica is created?
Right.
Is that its kryptonite? Like, we don't know.
I guess, I mean, that is kind of the point of Abyss, is that the replicas are kind of its kryptonite, but they're not, because stuff keeps happening the way the score says it'll happen, and then everything gets all fucked, and then suddenly your head is hurting because now you're overthinking it again, and
what I want to know, and Jade is a perfect example of this, I want to know if what Jade's score says about the day he created Nebulum.
Oh, I know.
Does it say, you know, this boy will try to create will create a monster, or does it say he will try to resurrect someone he loves and fail?
Right.
It's gotta say one or the other.
It does. I guess it could say both, but does it say specific? He says, you know, this boy will try to resurrect someone he loves and create a monster. Does it say that? Does it say he creates a copy of her that is a monster? What does it say? What is, you know, what happens? What? I don't know.
Exactly. Like that. And that thing is like, and here's the other sticking point about that, is that Jade's also a real example of this, because Van and everyone else who created replicas did it on purpose. They were trying, and they were like, this is the course of action my life is going to take now. Right? So we can assume that their score will, you know, course correct itself and stay consistent. Right. Jade kind of made Nebulum on accident.
Yeah.
And it fucked him up real bad. So, what does his post-Nebulum score look like?
That is a really interesting because that actually brings up a point I was going to lead into. And it's weird, I've beaten Abyss up and down and, you know, 3 Ways to Sunday, and I've never actually seen this side quest. I had to YouTube it. There is a side quest about kind of getting to go through the land, you visit some of the landmarks that are in Doth, which is the city of the Order of Lorelei.
Yeah.
And you get to you go through it, and it's considered a pilgrimage, and most people go on it at least once in their lives, and the deal is that, you know, Tyr has done it, Annis has done it, Luke's never done it because he's never left his manor, and then they asked Jade, he's done it 7 times, because, spoiler alert, the Curtis family, the family he was adopted into, is deeply religious.
Yeah.
They are incredibly devoted to the score, so that probably means that for most of his life, Jade was, until, like, you know, he kind of became an independent adult who could do whatever the fuck he wants, Jade was probably knee-deep in the score for most of his life. So then, okay, did he know? So he wasn't adopted by the Curtis family until after
Nebulum.
After Nebulum, because, you know, she ran the orphanage and taught him and all that good stuff. So then, like, after the whole Nebulum thing fucked him up real bad, he was adopted by the Curtis family because he's a genius, and he immediately used his new connections and the fact that he was in the military and he's brilliant to launch himself into replica research to try to make Nebulum, to try and resurrect Nebulum. That was literally all he was doing for like 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, did he ever once read his score? Did the score ever tell him he'd keep failing? Was that... I guess Jade is... I wonder if Jade kind of is our example of somebody who tried to defy the score and just kept fucking up.
I guess he would be.
Because I'm surely his score, if he had a score read to him, and it was like, you will try to do this thing, and you will fail, and you will fail, and you're gonna keep fucking failing, bruh, because you can't bring back the dead. And he just kept doing it, right? So then is Jade like the example of what happens? Because ultimately, what does happen to him, according to one of the side manga, as he tries to resurrect Nebulum, and he gets real fucking close, and the process blows him up. He literally has a giant scar on his chest from where his chest exploded.
Yeah.
So is Jade our example of what happens?
He must be. And, like, the idea of him being in a very, very religious family like that, he was very devoted to the score, I guess that would mean that he would know his score, but I guess he wouldn't care about it?
Because he's just so crazy devoted. I mean, he was, literally crazy. He was literally, like, insanely devoted to this idea of bringing somebody back from the dead because he couldn't acknowledge the existence of death. Because he's a weird, fucked up kid.
And now, I gotta wonder if, like, his family must have known his score as well, because he was just a little kid. It's not like they would trust him, to do that privately. You get your score right on your birthday, it's presumed that you do it in a public place, or or with your family at least.
Right.
If you're young, you would expect that. Maybe when you get older, it's more of a private thing. But like if you're a little kid like Jade was, you can assume he'd be under parental supervision, or he'd, because he wouldn't be old enough to understand what's going on.
Well, no. Now we're getting into... Because, like, and this is more stuff... Again, it'd be nice if we could see somebody's birthday score.
Yeah.
Because the deal is that Jade tried to bring back Nebulum when he was, like, 12 or 13, right?
Yeah.
So by the time the Curtis family adopts him, he's 13, 14 years old. So by then, you could almost presume that he would be left... Because you could say, maybe, that... Let's assume... Let's just headcanon right now and say that after a certain age... birthday score readings are private.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's 13. He can request that it just be himself and a maestro doing the reading, and they would have to respect that because that's just, like part of things. So in that case, maybe the family doesn't, the Curtis family wouldn't know.
Maybe they wouldn't, yeah. And then, so then at that point, he can just completely discard it and be like, yeah, whatever, I'm gonna do my own thing now. And then he blows
defy
up.
These stars. Yeah, and then he blows himself up eventually at like 26 or 27, something like that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That really...
Yeah. And it's in that case, that's more kind of weird, fucked up stuff, because now we know, if we take it at kind of face value there, that the score... You can go against your score, and the score will self-correct, but the score won't kill you for it, because your death is somewhere else in the score.
Yeah.
Right? Now, unless you keep going, and eventually... Oh boy. Oh god, now I'm talking myself in circles again. Because, okay, let's say you keep going at it, and you don't... Let's say Jade doesn't give up his crazy pursuit to resurrect the dead, so he blows himself up, and he doesn't learn a lesson, and he keeps doing it. Does that then mean that at some point, his score says... that by trying to defy fate eventually leads to his death or something like that? So doesn't that kind of mean he's now following the score?
God fucking damn it.
Shit! Shit! We just keep talking ourselves in circles!
I know, that's the hardest part, is like... What is the score? Like, okay, assuming the score can be defied and you can fight against it and push it, what's the score's threshold before it's just like, no, fuck you?
And at that point, if the score kills you, at that point, if you die because you were trying, and we kind of make it almost sound like the score is sentient, and Van kind of makes the score sound sentient too, which is also kind of creepy Silent Hill nightmare bullshit in the idea of the entire planet is alive, it's watching you, and you better do what it fucking says. It's terrifying. So, okay, but let's say you keep pushing against the score, and you keep doing your own thing. You read your birthday scores, you keep a close eye on it, and you always do the opposite of what the score tells you to do, right? So then you die as a result of all of it, but your death is written in the score, right?
Yeah.
Your death is written. Everybody's now, of course, the deal is that they do mention in the game, no one is allowed, maestros aren't allowed to read a score of death to a normal person.
Right.
Because obviously that would be chaos if you knew
scary.
you were going to die. That's terrifying.
But it still exists.
It still exists. So if you die as the result of you not following the score, in a way, that is the score reasserting itself at the very, very end, and that is horrifying to think about. That is literally the score going, no, fucker, I still have control, and I am going to kill you when I know you're gonna die. And there's nothing you can do about it, because at that point, you're dead. And then we get back into Van bringing back the dead, and suddenly, oh, great googly moogly, everything's gone to shit. You know? Because now, well, the score says you're dead, but now you're alive, technically.
And so you can keep following your score, technically.
But there is no score.
Yeah.
Because you're dead. There is no score afterwards. There's nothing else for you after that point. But there's still a person existing with all of your everything.
You know what makes this even really harder? It's something I just realized. And then again, it also ties...
Can we not?
Huh?
I said, don't make it any harder.
No, this will be great. This will be great, though.
No.
You'll flip your shit.
No.
One of the things I do a lot is because I both think they're really great villains, is I love comparing Van to Master Xehanort in Kingdom Hearts, because they're both fantastic villains with great plans who know exactly what they're doing at all times.
Right.
One of the things that's really interesting about them, and what it ties into this, is that you have characters who are the only the biggest authority on their subject matter. Like, Van knows every little detail about the score and what the score is and whatnot. You know? Right. B, they're also liars.
Yeah, they are.
So you have the guy who is like the only guy who knows everything that's going on, but he also lies all the time. How can you trust anything he says about his subject matter, knowing that detail? Right?
So even then, it's kind of like how helpless are you? How helpless are you? That's
we as players have only the game to tell us the truth.
Right.
And the truth has to come from somewhere. The score isn't written in in-game textbooks. It's not written, the rules of the score aren't written in a book you find in a bookshelf in a library somewhere. Right. They aren't, given to you by a neutral third party. They're given to you by the villain.
Right.
Who has his own perceptions about what should and should not be. So can we really... This whole thing hinges on us believing what Van says, but how can we really trust what he says?
No,
knowing
don't
that
do
he's
this!
a huge liar.
No! God damn it, why would you do that? Shit!
I'll bet this is how Phoenix Wright feels every single day of his life.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. This is probably how Phoenix Wright feels no matter what. It's just kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing, and every time I start asking questions, things go wrong! No!
Every time you think you figured it out, it's like, nope. Sorry, motherfucker.
JK, motherfucker, here's some more evidence from the game to fuck yo ass up. No! Oh, God. I'm just like...
It would be a shame if someone updated that autopsy report of the game.
The autopsy report is just the interpretation of what the score is, and we're just sitting there just like, no, not again.
And here's another weird tangent thought that I'm just like, wait a minute. How
right?
big are these fucking rocks?
They're pretty fucking big.
But, like, if they have everyone who ever was and ever will be in their exact minutiae details, how fucking big?
Okay, here's my theory about this.
The thing is, like, what we know is that Yulia Jue carved them.
Well,
so it's not, you can't be like, well, you just kind of, like, it speaks to the Meister or the Phone Master.
Well, I can, here's my theory on what the phone stones are, Phone stones are hard drives.
Okay. Alright.
Because the deal is that only certain people can read the score, right?
Right.
Like, Jade, going back to our favorite asshole in this game, Jade can't read the score because Jade can't command the 7th phonon at all. Only people who can wield the 7th phonon can read the score. So, Tyr, Natalia, Luke could, maybe.
Yeah.
But if they were hand-carved, right? Like in a rock, in Ancient Hispanian, which is the go-to old language of this game, then anybody would technically be able to read these things because they're huge. right?
Yeah.
But that's not what the phone stones are. The phone stones are just big rocks. That Yulia Jue inscribed, but that could mean anything.
Yeah,
because she could wield the seventh phonon, and she was the ear of the literal embodiment of sound, which is a really strange thing to say, but that's what Lorelei is. Lorelei is the aggregate sentience of the seventh phonon, as in when enough of seventh phonons get together, which is, by the way, I'll bring this up in just a second, but that's a really cool concept. But she is the voice of Lorelei. She relays everything he told her, and she's like, well, I'm going to inscribe all of this. But frankly, those could be anything. Yeah. I mean, she could use the seventh phonon to just record within the phone stones are very, like, they float, like, phone stones float in the sky over Aldrin too.
Yeah,
they bring that up. Aldrin has a ring like Saturn, which is really cool. And because of that, the stones have strange properties. I mean, you could almost make an argument that the stones are like hard drives.
I guess that does make sense then, yeah.
Because they are just giant special stones that are holding the information inscribed on them by the seventh phonon, and only other people who can wield the seventh phonon can read them. So really, I mean, the reason seven phone stones exist is because the first six ran out of hard drive space.
I guess so. You know what? That whole idea, and like you mentioned earlier about the idea of Lorelei being a sentient bunch of phonons, really more or less, that really ties back into the whole theory we have already that the score will course correct. The score kind of has to be sentient.
I mean, it has to be alive, right?
It has to be, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to automatically correct like that. It has to have some manner of thought process in order for our theory to actually work and to make sense. It has to have some level of tolerance and decision-making ability to decide what is and is not an acceptable variation.
Well, that, again, we're going back to the fact that Van is a liar.
Yeah.
But Van calls the score the heart of the planet. It's the heart and mind of the planet. It's, according to him, the planet is alive, and the score are its thoughts. It's its mind. And so, of course, it has to be alive. The score has to be alive to course correct like that, which is terrifying.
It is terrifying, and it is the only way everything we've talked about for over an hour makes sense.
And
it not only makes sense, but also will let me sleep at night.
But that's so scary to think about. But I mean, it's really the only thing that, and I guess, like a lot of, fantasy things are like the planet is alive. I mean, that's literally the point of Final Fantasy VII, is that the planet is alive.
Yeah.
But it's never quite presented so maliciously.
The thing is, like, the planet is alive, and 7 is kind of a, fluty, hippie. It's alive because it's nature, and nature is alive. And this one's like, no, it's a sentient being.
It thinks, and it has a will, and it exerts that will on you.
And a rib cage to keep that heart in.
The planet is actively exerting its will over you and everyone around you. That's... What? What? That's so fucked up. I know. And this is marginally off topic, but I did really want to say this. I love Tales of the Abyss's interpretation of what the spirits are.
Yeah.
Because, the spirits in Symphonia, they're actual spirits. They're, they're spirits. I mean, there's really no other way to...
You can talk to them.
You can talk to them, and they're things. They're kind of like people, but not... They're, in Symphonia, they're weird gods. They're just goofy gods. But then in Abyss, things get really weird, because the spirits aren't spirits. They're called aggregate sentiences, which is literally, if you get enough, for example, fifth phonons in the room, if you gather up enough fifth phonons, and that's the phonon of fire, and I only know that because that's the one on Mew's ring. If you gather up enough fifth phonons in the room, you can have a conversation with them.
Yeah,
because at that point they come alive, and that aggregate sentience is called Ifrit.
Yeah. And that's really cool. A really, really cool idea.
It's a really cool interpretation of the spirits.
Because that means that phonons in general all have some minor fraction of intelligence, no matter what. A single phonon has to have some level of consciousness.
Right.
On some micro level, it has to have some level of intelligence.
And so,
which again ties to everything about the idea of planet B. Well, in a way, aren't replicas just made of seventh phonons?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they are literally just giant masses of seventh. In fact, that's the whole reason the Tower of Rem happens.
Yeah.
Is because they needed a giant mass of seventh phonons to dispel the miasma, and so a whole bunch of replicas had to die.
Yeah.
But we're getting off topic.
No, are we?
No, you're right. We're not. You're right. We're not. Everything goes back to the score, just like in the game.
In all honesty, like there's so much to discuss, and I feel like I'm forgetting something that I thought of.
I know. I feel like I should have taken notes for once, and because okay, let's keep following that train of thought, Ben. If all phonons are marginally sentient, and replicas are made entirely of seventh phonons, then, what is a replica?
They're basically like FMA style homunculi.
Yeah, I guess.
A big solid mass of souls.
So, in that case, now I'm getting more metaphysical. So, if phonons are kind of the way that the planet keeps an eye on people, then, our replicas kind of are part of the score in a way, right?
Alright, let me try to piece that together. See if I can come up with an answer to that.
Help! Because otherwise I'm not going to be able to sleep.
I mean, it ties back to the point of what is the exact point where the score deviates when a replica is created? Does it happen when it's like a scientist, does the score say this scientist will try to create a replica and succeed, and then it just throws its hands up? You know?
Yeah.
Is that what happens? Or is it or does it say a scientist will try and fail, but in reality it actually does happen, and then the score throws its hands up?
Or is it or is it just saying the scientist will create something but doesn't specify the something, and succeed, and then the score doesn't throw its hands up, but the rest of us are, everybody else in the room's what the fuck?
Are replicas made of are replicas maybe replicas don't exist in the score because they're made of score?
Technically they are.
They're if the score is the seventh phonon,
right?
And they're made of seventh phonons,
yeah,
then the reason they don't exist is because they're their own personal score.
So, I mean, but in that case, Van was almost kind of right. Because in that way, all replicas are now entirely beholden to their own destiny, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not in the score, but if they are in fact made of the score, which makes sense kind of in a weird, fucked up way, then they all have a destiny, but nobody else knows that destiny, including themselves. So they are, in fact, the only creatures on Aldrent with true free will. And in that case, Van was right.
Yeah, Van... the crux of all of this is that Van was right the whole time.
He was just kind of an asshole about it.
Yeah, he was a dick.
He was just evil. But I mean, in a way, his plan, it almost was the right plan, but it wasn't, because of course all of these characters who I adore would die.
He was right for the wrong reasons, and the party was wrong for the right reasons.
Yes. And the question now is kind of, and of course we'll never know because we'll never get a sequel. What happens after Mr. Ending comes back?
Well, here's what I think.
Oh boy, fan theories.
And here's you kind of triggered this thought I just had now. Mm-hmm. The whole thing we've talked about a lot is that the score hates when you try to bring back the dead. It fucking hates it. It hates it a whole lot. It does
not fucking like it. Yeah.
No, it's like, no, you can't. Not at all. Right. Ever. What happens at the end of the game?
Right.
Luke and Ash, that's not a replica. He recognizes Tyr.
Right.
He knows who Tyr is, and he can talk.
Yes.
Which means that he's not a true replica, because replicas can't even talk or, do anything. They're babies.
Right, they're just infants with human bodies, adult bodies.
Mr. Ending can talk. He recognizes Tyr in the party.
Right.
Which means that Luke and / Ash came back to life. Which means the score had to be like, well, fuck this, I'm out. Whatever. Whatever, I'm done.
I have actually heard and I hate to do this to you, I have heard a really interesting fan theory that actually does kind of hold some water. That Mr. Ending is Lorelei.
That's fucking also possible. Because
Lorelei apparently did promise Yulia a very, 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 very long time ago that he would one day return. Since Luke and Ash are the promised children, they are the light of the sacred flame. They are literally they are kind of the embodiment of Lorelei on Earth.
Yeah.
It actually does kind of, you could almost make a very, very convincing argument that Mr. Ending is Lorelei.
He could be.
Because he doesn't say hi Tyr or hi Natalia. He just says, I made a promise.
Yeah.
And that promise could be, and the reason shit. The reason he would address Tyr is because Tyr is Yulia's descendant.
Yeah, so he would...
And Tyr looks a lot like Yulia.
So he would still recognize her, and he still wouldn't be, surprised to see a person in front of him. He would still be accepting of whoever was in front of him, because either he recognizes Tyr because he's Luke and or Ash, or he recognizes Tyr because Lorelei would know who Tyr is.
Because she
exists.
Is the descent... Yeah, and because Lorelei still exists, and she's the descendant of Yulia, and he made a promise to Yulia and her descendants that he would return someday. So... It actually does make total sense for Lorelei to appear specifically to appear right in front of Tyr. Not in front of, the rest of the party is behind her, but he very specifically is directly in front of Tyr. And in that case, it makes a ton of sense for Lorelei to manifest himself in front of the descendant of Yulia, and thus completing his covenant that he made with Yulia Jue a billion fucking years ago. So yeah, it could also maybe be Lorelei, and that just fucks things up even more. I'm sorry.
So what have we learned today?
Not fucking much.
Nothing. You know, I had this feeling when we were going to do this podcast.
Yeah.
I was looking at my notes. And I was reading the Wikipedia article and reading TV tropes.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, we're going to spend, over an hour talking about this. And by the end of it, we're not going to know a goddamn thing. We're not going to figure jack shit out.
We're not going to know fucking shit.
We're not going to leave this podcast satisfied.
You were right. You were right, my friend. In fact, I feel like by discussing the score with you for an hour and 20 minutes, I feel like I now know less than when I started.
I shouldn't have wasted that 8-bit theater panel of Black Mage saying this tells me less than nothing. on the E3 trailer for
You're right.
for Death Stranding, because like it would really fit here too.
It's true. I now know less than what I began. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
But I am really proud of the title card we do have for this episode,
which is
the scene from Futurama with the "What the hell is Kwanzaa" book.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The score?
What the hell is the score? Yeah, what the hell is... I mean, we really have not answered a single question. All I know now all I know for sure in my heart of hearts is that the score is sinister as fuck, and Van may have had a point.
Yeah, the only thing we've really come to a conclusion on is that the score is sentient and the score hates you.
And it's terrifying. Which really does not make me feel any better about the ending of the game, because, okay... Just to round this out, because we still, if we talk to an hour and 30 minutes, we're good. Just to kind of round this out. So, like, let's say the score is sentient, and the score is a giant asshole, and the score is like, hey, no matter what you do, I am going to fulfill myself. Go fuck yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So then, does that mean everybody in Aldrin's still doomed?
Fuck.
Sorry.
Shit. Because here's the thing about that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering a detail or two. The idea is that Van's whole plan is he wants to create all the replicas so that when the apocalypse does happen, he can be like, fuck you, score. I have backup people. Right?
I always thought that Van was kind of hearkening the apocalypse in by himself.
Well, like, I also think, like, his thing is, like, he's not going to create the apocalypse, he's speeding it up. Mm-hmm. So, like, he's putting it on the fast track to happening by doing the Eldrin shit.
Right.
But, like, his whole thing is, like, you can't blow up the world if I do it first, score!
Okay, well, hold on, let's see here. I've got the score. I finally found the Asalia page about the score. Let's see. The forces of Kimlaska Land Valdir shall march northward. The Kimlaskan army will stain the Malkuth throne with the blood of its last emperor, aka Peony, dies. Mm-hmm. And then Kimlaska, a mountain of corpses shall bury the fortress capital. Death and diseases shall envelop the city. The plague born thence shall become a new poison unto humanity, killing all within its reach. Its plague shall mark the true end of Malkuth. Kimlaska shall enjoy decades of prosperity as the plague of Malkuth grows. Ultimately, the plague will be brought into the Kimlaskan kingdom by a single man. The light of the sacred flame shall approach a Kimlaskan city of phone machines, seeking a way to purify the taint. There salvation shall be found through the use of a forbidden power. Thus shall Aldrin be destroyed by the miasma and turned to dust. This is the end of Aldrin. Boy, that's fucking grim.
Okay, so... No. The end of the world can't happen because they wiped the miasma.
Okay. I wonder if you could make the argument that the score fulfilled itself by destroying Eldrin, because Eldrin was a perfect copy of Aldrin. Or it was going to be a perfect copy of Aldrin.
Like...
So by destroying Eldrin and stopping it, then in a way...
Yeah, you might have just, like, wiped the score out entirely at that point. You might have tricked it into being like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah, it did finally throw its hands up and go, fuck it, I'm out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, is everybody doomed? Who knows? Maybe not. I mean, because the score seems to be very mutable, you could make the argument that maybe something else could be the miasma later down the line. I choose to believe it was a happier ending than that because I really like these characters, and I want them to be okay.
God.
But, I know, right? Fuck. I'm going to go on record and say that by destroying Eldrin, they averted the end of existence.
Yeah.
Because Eldrin was a proxy Aldrin, and by crashing it and being like, oh look, Aldrin's gone. Oh, the score went, oh, okay, and went back to sleep.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, night.
Good night, I'm done. And now everybody can kind of fuck around without fate breathing down their neck. And then eventually it can turn into the world of Tales of Vesperia.
Which is a fan wank theory we'll save for another podcast.
But I'll go to my grave thinking it. Damn it, those maps look too similar.
Sarah and I have both spent a lot of time divulging a theory that because Fantasia and Symphonia are the same world, because Berseria and Zestiria are the same world, it's entirely possible that the world of Vesperia is the future of Tales of the Abyss.
The very, 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 very distant future of Tales of the Abyss, but it could still absolutely be an option.
And we do have information backing that up.
It's mostly just the map.
But there's a few other things here and there, but that we haven't even talked. We were going to talk about the villains in this podcast. We didn't
do that at all. We kind of talked about Lagretta and Ion and a lot about Van. Yeah. I really like Van as a bad guy.
My head hurts.
I know, right? I feel like I need to go have a drink and pretend this never happened. Otherwise, I'm not going to sleep tonight.
We probably could go on and make this a full length 1 hour 45-minute podcast, but
we're already pushing the 1:30 mark, and
the plan was always to do a part 3 of Abyss because there's just so much for fucking Abyss to talk about.
Oh my god, there's so much about Abyss to talk about. I mean, how did this happen?
Because we both played the game 6 times.
And the game is so fucking good. Man, Tales of the Abyss is really fucking good, Ben.
It's really, really fucking good.
It's really fucking good.
Next time when we have a gap in the schedule, I'll have to look and put that in. But next time we'll talk about how cool the villains in this game are.
Because they are really cool.
Yeah.
And I really like all of them. But we're out of time, and I need a drink.
Yeah.
And I need to, not think about the nature of fate and the idea of a planet being alive and watching your every movement. That's just, like you said, it's like Silent Hill on a larger scale.
Yeah.
That's horrifying. Thanks, dude.
Special thanks to Visager for use of our background music, as always. A link to his work in the description. We have our Twitter account, at the Gorge Podcast. Link to that in the description. We have our email address. Hey, Christmas is coming in 2 months, and we are going to record a Christmas podcast. Literally 2 months today, actually.
Oh, is today the 24th or the 25th?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So we are going to do a Christmas podcast, and we're gonna do instead of doing our normal analysis, we're gonna talk about our favorite happy, fun video game memories. If you have a video game memory that you want to share with us and you want us to read on the air, send it to thegorgepodcast@gmail.com. Or
tweet it to us.
Yeah, or tweet it to us. Or if you just have any other general questions or comments or theories about what the score actually is, you can also email us at thegorgepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll read that shit off on the air.
And if we miss something and you want to call us a fucking idiot, then call us fucking idiots, because there's a lot to Tales of the Abyss, and I feel like even I, with my encyclopedic knowledge, probably missed something.
We'll own that shit. We'll own our mistakes.
We will. Fuck yeah, we will. Mostly.
Hey Sarah.
What's up?
You do another podcast now, don't you?
Oh yeah, I do. I guess we should now that we've got all this stuff to plug, I guess we should start doing plugs at the beginning of the podcast. Yeah. But we'll get to that next week, I guess. I am in another podcast. I am in an LGBT RPG podcast called Big Gay Nerds. It's exactly what the title kind of suggests. It's me and a bunch of awesome other people sitting around, and currently we're playing Monster Hearts. And it's fun. We talk about queer things and about just how awesome tabletop games are. And you should listen to it. We're called Big Gay Nerds. We're on SoundCloud. I don't know if we have a Twitter yet. I'll let you know. Next week, I'll let you know.
And I'll put a link to that in the description as well.
Yay!
Alright, so...
Is that it?
I think that does it for now.
Oh, my head hurts.
If you guys are ready for more Tales games, though, next week we're talking about Exilia.
Fuck yes! I'm real fucking stoked, brah. I don't want to, hype it up too much, but boy, I'm real fucking excited. I'm real fucking excited.
So that'll be a long one too.
Get fucking hype. But for now, I'm gonna go drink and forget everything.
Yeah.
Because it hurts. Good night, everybody. Feel better. Fuck Dima. Feel better, Ben. Good night.